Get in there. That one's on, and on. Perfect. Okay, welcome to a new episode of Josh's Car Corner and another installment of Project Crewman. Going to be a lot of big things happening to the car on this episode. You just saw me installing a factory air box in the factory position. I was actually missing one of the studs that locates and holds the air box. Thank you to Jack Torres for sending that to me. So I've now got that fully installed and ready for the top half to get installed once I've got cooling fans and battery cables installed, which are on the way. Like I said, a lot of big things are going to be happening in this episode. Some of those things have already happened. Made big progress with the drive shaft, with the exhaust system, with the shifter that's now installed, and the factory fuel pump and the tank are all back in its place. So I'll take you back in time and show you the things like that have already happened, and then we'll move on to some more things that are still going to happen in this episode. So if you've ever been underneath a GTO or any VZ car, you would know that there is a cross member that goes underneath the transmission, bolted to the tunnel to support the entire back end of the driveline. Now, if you have an automatic or a manual, you have different cross members. So the automatic one is actually doesn't go down very far, and it doesn't go very far back, as you can see. The manual one actually goes a lot further back, and it actually has exactly a 2-inch drop from the bottom here, this plate, to the mounting surface on the transmission tunnel. Now originally, after talking with my buddy Sean, what we were going to do is just make our own custom cross member. And what we found out is if we used one of these with the mount that I purchased for the 6L80, it would actually be exactly the right height if the mount just sat literally on this and was attached. The problem is, if we had just a piece of steel in there and then the mount I purchased, we were gonna have almost no bushing in there to reduce vibration. So this is the mount that I actually got, and this is from a company called G-Force. And I know what you're thinking, it is not the same company that makes the high performance half shafts and the drive shafts and the 9-inch IRS kit. It's actually a different company, also called G-Force. The way this works is this part actually bolts to the underside of the 6L80's mounting point. Then it's got this section, you loosen this bolt, and this whole section can slide backwards and forwards in these gates right here. And you've got about 2 inches of travel here, so you can move the bottom position to be located wherever your cross member is going to be. So what I'm gonna end up doing is, there's these studs here, right? I'm actually gonna take them and grind them all the way flat, get rid of them entirely. Then what I'm gonna do is drill one new big center hole right in the middle, and it's going to attach to the modification I've made here to the cross member. In order to get some rubber in there to reduce driveline vibration, I ordered a kit off of Amazon of these, and I got 4. And what these are is, they're literally just bushings that would go under some kind of an industrial engine or something, like an electric motor or a generator or something. So when they're hard mounted to like a concrete or a steel surface, if these are in between, this will reduce vibration. So these with my hand, I can flex these just the littlest bit. Here's what I've come up with so far. So what I'm trying to do is get myself back that 2 inches of height that I lose with the drop that's in the natural cross member. So these bushings are 1.18 inches tall, they say. So what I've done is I've taken some aluminum bar stock and I've just been cutting out sections. These sections are 1/4 inch thick, and I've stacked up 1, 2, 3 for another 3/4 of an inch. So I'm up to 1.92 inches of height, which is pretty darn close to 2 inches. I may still use a washer somewhere to get that extra little bit to get exactly to 2 inches, but what I gotta do now is I gotta do a series of holes right in the middle of all 3 of these, and I'm gonna open them up slowly so I can tap them for an M12 bolt that I'm going to install from the bottom, thread it up. The good thing about it being threaded is I'll save more material on this aluminum, and then also the bolt will be captive. It can't just fall out of here, so it'll be stuck. And then this hole I will make big enough for the bolt just to go through, so it won't be threaded, and then the whole thing can be attached. Now the other thing I have to do is I have to also cut away a little bit of the mount where these bolt heads are going to be. You can see right here it doesn't fit in between them, so I'm gonna have to cut this section back a little bit for where I'm ultimately gonna drill the hole in this. So that'll fit right in there, and also probably locate it a little bit too. And then if I still need to go side to side a little bit, the factory holes have got enough play in them that I can probably get it over the littlest bit. And just to show you how big the 6L80 is underneath, even with the factory crossmember, as far back as it goes, I still had to grind off a section right here so it will clear the pan, because the pan is so massive on the 6L and it comes so far back. I had to make myself a little clearance room. But I'm gonna get started doing a series of holes in here to drill this, open this up so I can thread it and put that longer bolt in. So there you go, the first step is complete. I have, as you can see, drilled all the way through. I started with a 1/4 inch pilot hole and then I went with the bigger hole. Now I needed to drill a hole that was 10.2 millimeters so I could tap it properly, but unfortunately, hardware store doesn't carry metric sizes, so I had to get as close as I could. I think I got a 27/64 bit, so I think I drilled a 10.3 millimeter hole. But as you can see, it threaded really nice, and I got the bolt up in there, and I had to put a washer on it because the threads don't go all the way up. But that is nice and tight holding the plates together, and then there will be plenty of room for that bolt. So now all I got to do is take the cage off of this thing, figure out where it's going to lay after I grind these studs off, and then I can cut holes in it on the sides here to make room for the bolt heads, and I'm going to be on my way. So here is the finished product. So this is that bracket I bought from G-Force, fully modified to fit my application. So what I had to do is take the studs that they included on it and I had to cut them down. And now what I have is this thing is bolted down tight at the perfect angle to be accepted and into the car. And I have one big M12 hole here. But then what I had to do is I had to cut out openings right here on both sides for the bolts for the studs that are going down into those rubber bushings. And as a result of that, I think I've lost a little bit of strength here. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna go over to a friend's house and I'm going to have him box weld these sides right here. Take some 1/8 inch steel and just weld it on to add a little bit more strength back into this section up here, because I noticed this when I was setting it up. You put the bolt here and then what it's doing is pushing this section up. So then the force is trying to tear this section apart. So by boxing it and adding some structure there, that should strengthen everything up and make this a lot better. So I'm gonna get that done. Then if I have to go back in here and open this up a little bit, I can. And I'm gonna go ahead and paint it and get ready to install this thing in the car once and for all. And here you have it, the finished product. All that gap that was there before to move the top section back and forth has all been closed in. Super thick now. Plenty of strength there, despite these cutouts being here. And I repainted the whole thing black last night. All right, now that the transmission is finally in its final resting place and mounted, it is time to start putting other things on. And the next thing I'm going to put on is the exhaust. But before I do that, I want to take a second to mention the drive shaft. If you remember, I got a Crewman drive shaft to go along with the rear axle that I got out of Australia. The problem is it does not bolt directly up to a 6L80. I actually got it up there and I took a measurement and it came out to be 147 millimeters shorter than it needed to be in order to attach to the transmission. And I wanted to use as many factory components as I could, so I needed to get the drive shaft lengthened. I took it to a shop and what they wanted to do is convert everything to U-joints. And I didn't want to do that because I wanted to have at least one rubber donut flange in there to reduce the NVH. So I got them to keep it in the front and they reused the rear section because it's got that section that extends and contracts like a CV shaft. They did have to replace the carrier bearing though, because they actually had to increase the diameter of both shafts. So this thing has got beefed up shafts fore and aft. It is longer and they've got a carrier bearing. I believe it's a carrier bearing out of a GTO. This is the old carrier bearing right here. This is unfortunately just a little too small, even though it's not in bad shape. But the whole thing is toughed up, beefed up. It is now final bolted in there as well. The drive shaft angle is still pretty good. So now you know about that, and I'm going to get on to the exhaust. These boxes just came from Rock Auto this afternoon. These are new O2 sensors, front and rear. I am going to run factory cats because I've actually got factory downpipes from a GTO with the factory cats installed. And I'm going to run a factory exhaust. When I go to register this thing, I want it to be as absolutely legal as it can be. So I'm going to start off with factory components. Maybe down the road I'll change to long tube headers. We'll see if I need the power. But it gives me the opportunity to put on this exhaust, which I got over 2 years ago now, and finally am gonna get to see in the flesh. This is from a company called X-Force, big exhaust company in Australia, and they are one of only a handful of companies that make a bolt-on catback exhaust for the Crewman. So this is gonna be great. It's 2.5 twin pipes. It does use the style where it all exits on one side, but it's 2 pipes, so it's a true dual exhaust. And I don't know if it's got a resonator, it's got a decent sized muffler, and it should have all the factory hangers in the factory location so I can reuse all of the rubber hanger flanges. Before I crack this box open though, I'm gonna go into the downpipes where they tap kit, and I'm just gonna re-tap the threads for all of the O2 bungs to make sure everything threads in real nice. Okay, I'm wrapping things up underneath, and I just happened to look back toward the engine from underneath by the transmission, and I noticed that the power steering line, that was touching the manifold right here. There's this little point that comes off for no real reason right there, and that is touching the line. So rather than let that become a problem, I'm just going to take my reciprocating saw since I've got it off, and I'm just going to hack that off quick and then file it down, make it smooth, put her back on. And there you go. Problem solved. Now it's time to look at this exhaust that I have not seen since I ordered it over 2 years ago. So I always love these unboxing moments. The mystery of what's inside. All right, well, straight off the bat, I see a muffler. Yes, factory hangers and everything. And unusual for a Holden, this has got to go over the rear axle. So it's got this up and over system, which is a bit odd looking to most of us here in the States, but this could actually be the resonator. This could actually be the intermediary section, and that's the over the axle part, because those don't look like tailpipes to me. So this is the true X pipe. I forgot about that. This has got a true X pipe. So that's pretty sweet. And then here is the final big section. This must be the muffler. This is definitely the tailpipes. It just doesn't have tips, because these are definitely the hangers. It's supposed to just be a straight through muffler though, so it gets louder the more throttle you give it. This is a performance exhaust, so it's gonna make a little bit of noise, but it shouldn't be too intrusive or annoying. You know, the funny thing is, the exchange rate with Australia right now is beyond amazing. Even when I ordered this 2 years ago, it was still pretty good. I think I paid in US for this whole system like under $600. And it's a pretty nice system. Over there it goes for over $1,000. What do we got here? Oh, maybe these are tips. Oh, I did get tips. Nice. Okay, there you go. Nice chrome tips. Oh, and they even say X-Force on the back. Perfect. That is what I was hoping for. So, excellent. I've got the whole system here. So, I'm going to get this whole area cleaned up, and then I'll start the process of trying to put everything underneath here together and get this exhaust on. Okay, a couple more updates to show here. As you can see, the front end's on the ground here. I actually rolled the car forward a little bit because I started mocking up the exhaust, and you can still see the problem there. I think I have a solution for that, but I won't find out for another couple days. So I'm just seeing how the exhaust fits under here. And I've got it, like I said, all mocked up, but the car's still too close to the wall back here, so I was only able to get one of the nice chrome tips on. But I can see right here that this hanger does not line up. I actually am going to want to move this whole hanger on the exhaust forward, so then this arm is pulling everything backward, because originally when I set it all in here, everything was forward, and the hump here was not centered over the axle shaft. And that's where you want it. So I need it to hold everything backwards while working on this. But it's in there. Looks pretty good otherwise. Other thing I'm doing is, you can see here, there's little plates right here that are like pyramid shaped. And I think they're kind of braces for the bed to the frame. And when I took them off, the undersides of them were all coated with rust. So I cleaned them all off, and I'm repainting them right now. But what I did to hopefully prevent that in the future is I just put down this Dynamat aluminum tape. So it doesn't really have any thickness. It's just a piece of aluminum, but it should eliminate the steel on steel contact and hopefully prevent future rust. So that's all done. Holes are cut out. Once those are done drying, I'm going to bolt those on, and one step closer to the back end being done. Okay, because of the problem with the new exhaust system not lining up with the head tubes, I'm not going to be able to fix that right now, so I'm going to move on to the fuel system. So I've got some complications with the Crewman because the Crewman does not have a fuel tank like a GTO has. It has what's called a saddle tank. So what happens is the drive shaft goes right through the middle of it, and you've got storage units on both sides of that drive shaft. But the way Holden did it, they only have one pump and bucket system. Normally with a saddle tank, you'd have 2 pumps and 2 buckets and they'd feed a common line. What Holden does instead is they've got this line that runs across the saddle and it's supposed to sit down in the bottom of the other side and have fuel sucked up through an orifice here with the venturi, and then that fills up the other side, so all of the fuel should eventually end up on this side of the tank. Now I knew that I needed to replace this pump, possibly this bucket. I could get a whole new fuel pump bucket assembly from Australia, but by the time it got here, it was probably going to cost around $500. So what else could I do? Amazingly, on the LS1 GTO page, someone else was doing some digging into this, and he found out that this whole fuel filter assembly, which I thought was not serviceable, and it isn't, but what it is replaceable. And GM used to sell these as a replacement part, but they were not the only company to use this thing, as I found out, and actually as he found out. This right here is my replacement fuel filter assembly, and I don't know if you can read this sticker right here, but that is a Toyota part number. This module was used in the Land Cruisers from '97 to sometime in the mid 2000s. It's the exact same fuel filter setup as Holden used. I mean, we knew Holden was scavenging parts from wherever they could to put these cars together. You got a Celsonic AC condenser, and the charcoal canister is Denso, a Mitsubishi starter. This is just another one. So I got this one on Amazon. It is a genuine Toyota part. You can get Chinese knockoffs of these that are cheaper if you want to take that risk. I wanted to go with something that was authentic. This was $60, but you can get them for as little as 20 bucks, but you can change it. You don't have to have an external filter, and you don't have to switch buckets if you don't want to. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start taking all of these vacuum lines and modules off of this assembly and transfer them one by one over to this assembly. And for a new pump, I went to the old trusty standby, and I had one of these in the GTO before. This is a DW65C pump. They make a kit for Subaru, but they also make a kit for the GTO with the right filter media and everything to work on this setup. So I'm going to go ahead and start switching everything over and put myself together a new pump and bucket assembly for, what did this come to? Both of these $200. So I'm saving a lot of money versus just getting another one over here from Australia. So I'm going to get to it. Hang on. Mental note, take pictures before you take something apart so you can remember how it goes back together, and then you don't end up in the same situation that I just ended up in. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, snap this guy back in. It's got to go in there. Plug our fuel level sender back in. Perfect. And there you go, just like that, a rebuilt fuel pump with a brand new filter and a little bit more fuel flow performance to boot. So I'm going to go ahead and drop this back in the tank. Once again, I got to thank my buddy down in Perth, Fu Manchu. He got me this new O-ring for where the top of the fuel pump bucket sits on the tank. These are really hard to find now, and I was going to have no hope of getting one here in the States. So thank you very much to him for sending this to me. The other one was okay, but it was a little tougher rubber than this, so I'm glad to have a brand new one. Okay, went a little farther, but that's fine. All right, perfect. One other thing I decided to do is I'm gonna hide logos for any aftermarket companies that I use on the rebuilding of this thing on the car, but not in plain sight. So this is gonna be covered up by the bed, this Deechworks logo, but if anyone ever takes the bed off somebody, they're gonna know there's a high performance pump in here. Okay, now to go put this thing back in the bed. And there you go, the fuel tank is back where it belongs. Now I'm not gonna go ahead and bolt this protective frame down right away because knowing my luck, I'm gonna have to run wiring harnesses up and underneath this thing and I'd have to take it back off anyway. But this part is done. Let's find something else to put back together. Okay, I'm back under the car with the transmission here because I just received in a new part. I got a factory GTO shifter rod, and I'm just looking at how it's going to fit on the car right now. Now the nice thing is it attaches perfectly to the 6L80, the same square shape and everything for the hole, no problem there. Already there are problems here though. You can see right there, the shift rod is hitting the transmission. In fact, this is fixed in place now and rigid tight. It won't even move. So I'm gonna have to rebend this to bring it further outboard and then go into a line to the transmission. The other things I'm gonna have to do is figure out how to lock this, because I haven't figured out how to lock this yet. It moves around and I'm not sure if I need to tighten this more or what, but I'm gonna start by marking my points, and I gotta bend this more outboard and then bend it back inboard back there. Fortunately, I've got plenty of shaft here to increase the distance and make that happen. So I'm gonna get started on that. All right, I've been messing with this now for about 45 minutes, and I think I've got something that works. So I really had to change the angle and make the rod go way to the outside, because it was hitting just about any time I shifted it into any gear without bending it way out like that. And then over here you can see it's nice and straight there. It's not gonna hit anything on the front of the trans there really. And I can go through the entire range of motion here. As you can see, there's what would be one, and I still got clearance. So we're all good there. So now I gotta go back up top and check out one other thing. So as you can see right now, this is the shifter I want to use in the car, but the place with all the gates for the gears is broken off. Now I actually got it that way, but I might want it that way because I'm not entirely sure that the detents on the transmission are going to line up with where the holes were on this thing. So now I've got that piece back in there, so I've got to be very careful about how I do this. I just want to see if this thing is going to fall in where the detents actually are. So I'll push the shifter down, put it in reverse. That's reverse. Okay, that's going to line up. There's neutral. It does kind of line up with neutral. There's drive. It lines up with drive. 3, 2, 1. Oh my gosh. Well, it's a little off on 1, and it's a little off on neutral, I think. Well, actually, no, it pulls it up into a nice place for neutral, actually. Let me go back to 2 for a second. No, it was 1. Okay, so now 1, it doesn't quite line up with 1. But that thing could be pushing up on it. It's a little bit off, but you know what? How often am I going to put it in 1? For all the other gears, that seems pretty good. So now, what I've got to do is I've got to reattach this thing. So I'm going to go through a pretty big process here. Okay, remember how the shifter was broken on the top there where all the detents were? I got that fixed, so I want to show you here. This is the shifter I thought I was eventually going to use because this one doesn't have broken detents on it. See how that's still intact there, not broken? Problem is, I cannot use this because VZ cars have an extra sensor on them to let the computer know that everything is in park. And it's got little standoffs right here to locate that sensor that are missing. So I would have had to get rid of it and do some other things or custom rig this to make it work. I didn't want to do that, so I went ahead and fixed this one. Now, as you can see, you see a bunch of tan colored stuff right here. This is actually JB Weld plastic bonder, but that is not the only thing I did to fix this. First thing I did was I just took normal super glue and I just glued this piece back in, let it dry for a couple of days. Then I went and did a life hack that I kind of saw on the internet where you take your soldering iron and you take out the tip and you put in a small bolt with a flat head surface on it, and you let that become the heating element. You get it hot, and then you can use pieces of metal and actually melt them and push them into the plastic, and they act as strength rods to hold everything together. So in this case, it's just a couple of staples that I crushed in a stapler, and then I heated them up and I pushed them in. I actually did it a couple of times for practice on here, and you can kind of see, right there, you can kind of see one of the staples. See how that's in the plastic? So if this were broken, this would help to hold it together, and once it's pressed down in there, it's not coming out. So I've got that going with the plastic bonder. This is never coming off. So now I can get this installed, reattach it to the shift rod, and I have got myself a shifter for my 6L80 transmission. Okay, one last update in the back here. Everything is pretty much done. I have got the fuel tank installed and the pump is in, and you'll also see that I've got this foam pad reinstalled. This was back here. The bed actually sits on it on these parts of the frame right here, and these were coming up when I originally took the bed off, so I re-adhered them and put them back on. This is the factory charcoal canister for the Crewman. I've made a couple of changes to it for US emissions, so I had to add a couple of things. I had to add this. This is a canister vent solenoid from a GTO, and then that's the wires to control it. And then to the fuel pump itself, I had to add this. This is a fuel tank pressure sensor, and I've wired that in, and everything is now done back here. I still have to add back some foam padding right here, and I believe there's a plastic piece too that covers it up and holds it in place. I got these little edge pieces in as well. Now, if the wiring's here, then you should also be able to guess. I've got the floor harness back in. So it's all back in. I still have to make some changes. I have to add the sensor right there that's part of the stability program. I just got to wire it all in. I've got the connector. Coming up here, still got a little bit of wiring to do here. I have to put a new connector on here for the map sensor, and I still have to do a little bit of wiring here for the ABS connector. So this episode is going to end right where it started, in the engine bay. One more announcement to make here. I did receive my new cooling fans, and I also got my battery cables. Now, these came from Kenny Day Parts in St. Louis, Missouri, I think. I talked to him, and he had just taken in an 05 GTO that was getting parted out, so he got these out of that car for me. They're in really good shape. He even sent along, because I told him I'd rep him on the show, this t-shirt. And he gave me a choice of two. I went with this one because it's got all the different Holden cars on it, but I do need to pick him up on a bit of a technical issue here. The GTO has got the exact same wheels as the G8. They're G8 wheels. So Kenny, before you make the next run of t-shirts, you got to clean that up. I spotted it, others will too. So that's going to do it for this episode. There's going to be, on the next episode, brakes. That is the last big thing to do, and start putting the interior back in. And once all the wiring is done and I put a battery in here and I can start running some test and programming modules, it's going to be very, very close to firing this thing up for the first time since 2017. And I am getting so excited for that day to come. So thanks for watching this episode of Josh's Car Corner and Project Crewman. I'll see you in the next one.